Gam Yu-eun anxiously checks her lottery numbers on her laptop. As soon as she realizes she's won first place, she falls back onto the bed in shock. Overwhelmed with excitement, she quickly messages Ji-woo to share the incredible news. She's finally leaving the company. The next day at work, Yu-eun surprises her colleagues by arriving in an unusually cheerful mood. Known for her constant frustration, her sudden happiness raises a few eyebrows. Nonetheless, she carries out her tasks as the perfect secretary to President Dohyeok. Dohyeok became the president of Irene, Korea's leading cosmetic brand, at a young age. Renowned for his sharp business acumen, he propelled the company's annual sales to new heights. Though he was undeniably handsome and intelligent, his good looks were deceiving. Beneath them, he was ruthless. As Yu-eun places a cup of coffee on his desk, she tells him she has something urgent to discuss. However, her irritation flares when he, as always, calls her Secretary Kong instead of her actual name. She had been Dohyeok's secretary for a year now, enduring his infamous temperament and relentless demands. Working for him meant being on call at all hours, and she had long wanted to quit. One evening, Dohyeok left the office without informing her, causing her to leave late. Frustrated and exhausted, she had planned to buy bunggyeobang, the fish-shaped pastry filled with sweet red bean paste, to lift her mood, but by the time she got there they were sold out. Out of sheer annoyance, she impulsively bought a lottery ticket instead, never expecting to win. Now, with her windfall in hand, Yu-eun is determined to leave behind her exhausting job, endless debt, and tyrannical boss. She hands in her resignation letter, only for Dohyeok to reject it outright. Stunned, she watches as he casually pushes the letter back toward her and shifts the conversation elsewhere. Throughout the day, he continues to pile more tasks onto her as if nothing had happened. Confused and frustrated, Yu-eun has no choice but to comply. For now. Later that night, Yu-eun arrives home after another exhausting overtime shift. Tearfully, she wonders what the point of winning the lottery is if she's still trapped as Dohyeok's overworked secretary. Staring at her bank account, the numbers confirming her 16 billion won balance, she contemplates what to do with it. Stocks, real estate, or starting a business? All seem like viable options. But then, a deeper question arises. Why did she even become a secretary in the first place? She had fallen into the job right after finishing her freshman year, when it was finally time to step into the workforce. But now, she decides, she will never be a secretary again. What she really wants is revenge. The next morning, Yu-eun sits at her desk, exhausted. She had spent all night crafting her revenge plan and finally settled on 3 ideas. As Dohyeok approaches, she executes the first. Choi Dohyeok, she calls out, deliberately mispronouncing his name. But he keeps walking, completely unfazed. Yu-eun expected this and immediately moves on to plan 2. She pours an excessive amount of salt into his coffee, serving it with barely concealed anticipation. Will he explode in anger? Will he finally snap? However, Dohyeok takes a sip, his expression unchanging. He doesn't so much as blink. Yu-eun watches in disbelief and turns to leave, until she suddenly hears his chair scrape against the floor. Her heart stops as he stands and walks toward her. This is it, she thinks. I'm done for. She squeezes her eyes shut, bracing for his wrath. But instead, a gentle hand ruffles her hair. I'm sorry, Dohyeok murmurs. Yu-eun's eyes snap open in shock, but before she can react, he turns swiftly back to his seat, gesturing for her to leave. Still stunned, she watches as he takes another sip of the coffee. This time, he freezes. Finally tasting the overwhelming salt, he mutters, Secretary Kang finally snapped. Later that evening, Dohyeok finds himself at a bookstore, deep in thought. He wonders why Secretary Gam is acting so strangely. Is she sick? Until now, he had enjoyed teasing her by calling her Secretary Kang, a habit he never thought much about. She had always been a model secretary, never making mistakes. So why did she mess up the coffee? To him, mistakes equated to failure. But, unlike his past incompetent secretaries, Yu-eun was different. He wasn't about to let this slip. Determined to fix whatever was wrong, he buys an armful of books on management and workplace psychology. The next day, Yu-eun arrives at the office on time, still baffled by the president's unexpected reaction. Her previous plans had completely failed, but she remains undeterred. She moves on to her third strategy. This time, she deliberately messes up his usual sandwich order, replacing pickles with an overload of cucumbers, something she knows he dislikes. Yet, instead of getting annoyed, Dohyeok praises her for a job well done. To make matters worse, he even corrects her pronunciation of his name, proving that he was fully aware of what she had been trying to do. Before she can react, he calmly leaves the office, remarking, "Humans make mistakes." Then, without warning, he informs her that he'll be out all afternoon. Yu-eun's face lights up. "Shall I reschedule your meetings?" she asks eagerly. But he simply waves her off. No need. Shocked, Yu-eun stares after him as he walks away. Her hands tremble, and the tray she's holding slips from her grip, clattering onto the desk. What the hell is going on? Later that night, she vents to Ji-woo about Do-hook's bizarre behavior. Ji-woo listens thoughtfully before making a bold suggestion. Maybe he's trying to help you relieve stress. Yu-eun scoffs, but as she replays her interactions with him, something clicks. Had he actually noticed her suffering? His sudden politeness unsettles her more than his usual cruelty. She can't help but wonder, is this the real him? After messing up Do-hook's coffee and sandwich, Yu-eun remains determined to get her revenge. Ji-woo, noticing her frustration, asks what she plans to do next. Awkwardly, Yu-eun recounts her failed attempts. Ji-woo chuckles and suggests a different approach, finding Do-hook's weaknesses by discreetly following him. Yu-eun hesitates but ultimately agrees. The next day, while tidying up Do-hook's office, she stumbles upon a book titled How to Educate Disobedient Children. She freezes, flipping through a few pages in confusion. Does he have kids? The thought is absurd, yet the book is there in plain sight. Before she can think further, she's interrupted by the arrival of Director Lee. Dressed sharply and carrying a suitcase, Director Lee sets a small package on the desk. "I got this for you in France," he says with a charming smile, handing Yu-eun a gift. Noticing a loose button on her blouse, he casually helps her fasten it. Yu-eun stiffens. Lee Wai-ye, the scandalous third son of Hanang Group and one of Do-hook's closest friends, was notorious for his playboy ways. But before she can react, Do-hook strides into the office. His eyes immediately darken upon seeing Lee adjusting her blouse. "What are you doing here?" Do-hook asks coldly. Lee smirks. "I came to see my old friend, and, of course, Secretary Gam." The air between them grows tense. Sensing the rising hostility, Yu-eun quickly excuses herself to fetch coffee. As she walks out, Do-hook unexpectedly calls out, "Shahti," correctly pronouncing her name. Lee raises an eyebrow. "Oh? You're finally calling her by her real name now?" Do-hook ignores him. "Leave." Lee, unfazed, lets his gaze drift across the desk, until he spots the book. He picks it up with amusement. "Wait, this book? Don't tell me your monk friend is really raising a kid now." Do-hook sighs, rubbing his temples. "Secretary Gam has been acting strangely lately. She needs adjustment." Lee flips through the pages with interest. "I see. And here I thought you were finally trying to understand human emotions." Do-hook scowls. Lee only grins wider. "She's cute and charming. If you need help fixing her, I'd be more than happy to step in." The words barely leave his mouth before Do-hook's expression turns murderous. "Touch her and I'll break your face." Lee raises his hands in surrender, laughing. "Relax, man. I was joking." But then his gaze flickers back to the book. "Wait, are you actually following this thing's advice?" Dohyeok snatches the book back with a glare. Get out. Lee shakes his head with a sigh. You're still such a robot. That evening, Ji-woo tries to console Yu-eun. You're giving up too quickly. Start with what's within your control. Yoon, still frustrated, tells Ji-woo about the strange book she saw. Ji-woo pauses, then bursts out laughing. So, he's actually married and suspiciously nice to his wife? Yu-eun bristles. I hate him. She had assumed Do-hyuk was some cold-hearted workaholic. But now, the idea that he might have a secret, loving family makes her feel resentful. Why should he get to have a perfect home life when she never did? Ji-woo interrupts her thoughts with a sudden suggestion. Be late tomorrow. What? You've never been late before, right? So do it, shake things up. Yu-eun protests at first, but after some persuasion, she gives in. That night, she does something she hasn't done in years. She relaxes. She watches TV, drinks beer, and eventually drifts off to sleep on the couch. Then she has a dream. In it, she's Do-hyuk's wife, smiling sweetly and acting lovey-dovey with him. Yu-eun jerks awake, utterly horrified. What kind of nightmare was that? Still dazed, she rubs her face, trying to shake off the dream's unsettling warmth. As she gets ready for the day, a thought lingers in the back of her mind. Why did her subconscious create such a ridiculous scenario? And, more importantly, why didn't it feel entirely unpleasant? Yu-eun had spent years ingraining discipline into her routine. Being late was never an option, but today she arrives late, stumbling on the way in and scraping her knee. By the time she reaches her desk, the morning meeting is already about to begin. A familiar voice comments, "You're late." Yu-eun freezes. The president. She whips around, startled, and quickly bows. "I'm sorry." Do-hyuk studies her for a moment before asking, "Did you oversleep?" She hesitates. "Something like that." His sharp gaze lingers on her. "Why did you sleep so late?" Without thinking, she blurts out, "Because you always make me work overtime." There's a brief silence. Then, to her surprise, he says, "I won't do that anymore." Before she can process his words, he frowns and looks down. "You're bleeding." Yu-eun follows his gaze and sees the small cut on her knee. Embarrassed, she hurriedly explains, "I just tripped." Do-hyuk extends his hand. "Come with me." She hesitates. Is this his new way of bullying her? But she has no choice but to follow. Inside his office, he takes out a first aid kit and begins disinfecting her wound, ignoring her weak protests. She yelps at the sting, and his brows furrow. "Did that hurt?" As she looks up at him, his handsome face dangerously close, her mind betrays her. Last night's dream flashes before her eyes. She quickly shakes it off. Earlier that morning, Do-hyuk had been deep in thought. Yu-eun's behavior had changed drastically over the past few days, and he was concerned. To address the issue, he turned to a book he had recently started reading. How to Educate Disobedient Children. It had surprisingly insightful advice. So far he had read. Chapter 1. Pay attention to the broken child. Observe the root cause of their behavior. Chapter 2. Attitude towards a broken child. Provide a comfortable atmosphere and offer praise. Following this guidance, he had been watching Yu-eun's erratic work hours and concluded that her excessive workload might be the reason for her breakdown. Today, as he flips to Chapter 3, Communicating with a Broken Child, the book advises ending conversations over a meal. With this in mind, he decides not to scold Yu-eun for being late. Instead, he asks why. When she admits it's because of overtime, Chapter 1's lesson clicks into place. This is my fault. He was about to invite her to dinner when he noticed the fresh wound on her knee. And now here he is, clutching her up. After finishing the bandage, he straightens up. Yu-eun, still processing the situation, mutters, "Thank you. Should I get you some coffee?" Dohyeok pauses. Coffee? He had meant to invite her to dinner, but before he can say anything, she's already walking away. Meanwhile, his phone vibrates. A woman keeps messaging him, asking to meet. She waits for his response, but when none comes, she sighs. "I thought he would come," she murmurs. Her driver glances at her through the rearview mirror. Is something wrong? She shakes her head. No, nothing. Yu-eun finally pays off her debt, but instead of feeling relief, she feels lost. She recalls the job interview she had years ago. Which are financial goals? At the time, she had no answer. Now, she has more money than she ever imagined, 16 billion won, but she still doesn't know what to do with it. Ji-woo had told her she was lucky to live a good life, but Yu-eun doesn't see the world that way. If it were truly fair, her parents wouldn't have gone through what they did. She has been living alone for 10 years. The only family she has left is her aunt, who constantly pushes her to get married. Yu-eun doesn't understand it. Do people get married because they need a family? She doesn't feel the same way. To her, family is something you should be able to rely on, something safe. But instead of home, the only place she feels she can return to is the company. With that thought, she steps back into the office. After taking a half-day off, Yu-eun unexpectedly bumps into President Dohyeok. "Are you free later?" he asks. She hesitates but replies, "Yes, it must be another night shift." But then, to her shock, he shyly adds, "We've never eaten together before." Yu-eun freezes. Did I hear that right? Moments later, they sit across from each other in the company cafeteria. Dohyeok clears his throat. "I realize I haven't paid much attention to you before, but I want to change that." Yu-eun blinks, taken aback. He continues, "Lately you've been on my mind." His gaze lingers on her. "And I don't plan on letting you go." Her face heats up. "Was that a confession?" She immediately stands up. Dohyeok frowns. "Where are you going?" "I need some water," she blurts out, avoiding his gaze. As she storms off, she can't shake the feeling that something is wrong with him. What's with this sudden change? Later, Yu-eun goes shopping with Ji-woo. She browses through expensive outfits, but can't stop thinking about yesterday's events. Even as Ji-woo shows her designer pieces, her mind keeps replaying Dohyeok's words. Why did it feel like he was confessing? Eventually, she tries on an outfit, feeling shy. She has never spent so much money on herself before. But should she? She stares at the price tag, feeling dumbfounded. Taking a deep breath, she shakily hands her card to the cashier and pays in full. As she leaves the store, guilt creeps in. I can't believe I spent so much. But then she checks her bank balance. It's barely changed. Her mood instantly lifts. Still, she makes a promise to herself. No more reckless spending. The next day, Dohyeok calls her to his office. Yu-eun sighs but reluctantly goes. As she enters, he begins discussing the weekly schedule, but then he pauses. His eyes widen. She tilts her head. "Sir?" "Leave," he suddenly orders. She forces a polite smile. "So he's going to tell me to change the schedule instead." "Understood," she says, and walks out. As soon as the door closes, Dohyeok leans back and mutters under his breath, "She looks beautiful." Later, Yu-eun shivers from the cold as she works at her desk. She drapes a blanket over herself and keeps typing. It's strange, she hasn't been forced to work overtime lately. Just then, Dohyeok approaches. His gaze flicks to her blanket. Without a word, he disappears into his office, only to return moments later with his coat. "Put this on," he orders. Yu-eun hesitates but obeys. "You're always cold," he mutters. You'll catch a fever at this rate. I'm fine, she insists, but then she starts coughing. Dohyeok sighs. I'll help you put it on. She shakes her head. I can do it myself. But the coat is far too big and she struggles to find the sleeves. Before she can protest, he steps in, adjusting it for her. His hands brush against hers. Go home early, he says firmly. That evening, Lee visits Dohyeok's office. Where's Secretary Nam? Lee asks. I sent her home. She didn't look well, Dohyeok replies. Lee raises an eyebrow. Oh, you sound concerned. He smirks. Does Secretary Gam have a boyfriend? Dohyeok visibly tenses. Lee grins. Wait, are you jealous? Before Dohyeok can react, Lee suddenly grabs his face, studying him. Right at that moment, Yu-eun walks in. She stops in her tracks. She had come to return Dohyeok's coat. But now, seeing the two men in a bizarre position, she doesn't know what to do. He's not married, right? Just then her phone buzzes. A text from Dohyeok. How are you feeling? Before she can reply, another message follows. Are you free next week for a drink? Yu-eun stares at her screen, stunned. The scene shifts to their first get-together. She sits across from him, feeling awkward. How did I end up here? After witnessing the awkward scene last week, Yu-eun finally decides to open up and have an honest conversation with Dohyeok. How much can you drink? She asks, curious. To her surprise, he responds. I don't drink at all. I'm afraid I might get addicted. A sudden realization dawns on her, and she wonders, why did he bring me here if he doesn't drink? Dohyeok then asks her about her drinking capacity. Yu-eun shrugs. I drink as much as anyone else. She takes a sip of the bitter alcohol. He looks at her with concern. Do you have any worries? Feeling a bit awkward but determined to speak her mind, she answers, I guess it's time to think about getting married. His immediate refusal to get married infuriates her. She's about to retort, but Dohyeok quickly adds, just stay by my side like this. Yu-eun's cheeks redden at his words. Any concerns about your salary or treatment? He asks casually. Then it clicks in Yu-eun's mind. It's because of her lottery win that he insisted on this dinner. Forcing a smile, she answers, I don't have any specific concerns right now. Dohyeok leans in and confesses, I heard you were thinking about resigning. Honestly, that's the only way I could think of to keep you close. He continues, You've been the best secretary I've had. I don't think I'll find someone as perfect as you again. Yu-eun is touched by his words, but she can't help thinking, if he keeps talking like this, I might end up staying here forever. After a night of excessive drinking and receiving praise, Yu-eun leaves the restaurant feeling light-headed. Dohyeok offers to call a taxi, but Yu-eun stops him. I have a secret to tell you, she says, her voice low. Dohyeok looks at her curiously but stands firm, refusing to let her distract him. Yu-eun, feeling bold, grabs him by the collar and pulls him closer. She whispers in his ear, I won 16 billion won in the lottery. Are you jealous? Her words catch him off guard, making him pause and think. She adds, frustrated, It might not be much to you, but for someone like me, it's enough to quit my job. She grabs him by the collar again. Do you even know my full name? Surprised, he calls her by her full name, something he's never done before. Yu-eun releases her grip in shock. Dohyeok shyly apologizes, admitting he never called her by her name before. She lectures him sternly, saying, From now on, call me Yu-eun. He nods and agrees, deciding not to send her home alone. Where do you live? He asks, but she refuses to answer, her anger growing. Dohyeok seems to think for a moment before suggesting, I'll take you to a hotel first. I don't want you to get hurt. Yu-eun snaps. I'll be fine. But he insists, eventually taking her to his home instead. The next day, Yu-eun wakes up to find herself in Dohyeok's bed. What now? She wonders, pretending to still be asleep. Dohyeok exits the shower and Yu-eun can't help but sneak a glance. She's astounded by his appearance, but quickly averts her eyes when he notices her watching. "Is your stomach okay now?" he asks, still concerned about her health. Yu-eun, caught off guard, reminds him, "You're not wearing clothes." Realizing his mistake, he quickly turns away and apologizes shyly. As he walks away to put on clothes, Yu-eun is left behind, feeling flustered. Why was I thinking that about him? She shakes off the thought. Just then, the front door opens. A woman enters, calling out for Dohyeok. She freezes upon seeing Yu-eun on his bed, both women equally surprised. Dohyeok reappears and sees the two women standing there. Yu-eun awkwardly tries to explain, but the woman, Hyo-rin, interrupts. "I always thought you were gay or wanted to be a monk," she says with a laugh. Yu-eun is still processing when Hyo-rin wishes her the best and adds, "Have you told your father yet?" Her father? Yu-eun thinks. That's the chairman? Go young. Suddenly everything clicks. She recalls how Dohyeok's maternal family took him in, and realization hits her like a ton of bricks. After completing his studies abroad, Dohyeok's adoptive parents now run the family business. He excuses himself, saying he and Yu-eun have work to do. Yu-eun stands up to leave, apologizing for her actions the previous night. Once home, Yu-eun reflects on what it truly means to come from the Chae family, inheriting a successful business and being wealthy. She's worked alongside Dohyeok for a while but never discussed their families. Now she realizes he comes from a completely different world. Lately, his actions have been making her feel strange. She wonders if her change in attitude is because of the lottery or because she's always overworked. She's been working for so long and yet she's unsure. Despite it all, she decides to resign, to stop being a secretary. Meanwhile, Dohyeok's cousin, Hyo-rin, teases him about Yu-eun, and he explains that she's his secretary. Hyo-rin hands him an envelope, leaving him stunned. She sighs and comments that this man had started sending letters to their house when nothing else worked. How could someone like him be his father, she asks. Dohyeok angrily crumples the paper without reading it. Hyo-rin admits she peeked through the letter and says it mentioned that he's coming back to Korea, which leaves Dohyeok bewildered. Back in the office, Yu-eun starts thinking about her resignation letter. She hasn't fully figured out her future, but she knows one thing for sure: she wants to quit. The biggest reason is her boss, but she hesitates to admit it. Lately, seeing him change, she feels blank. She knows there can never be anything between them, as they come from different worlds. Yu-eun is determined to leave, but as she approaches Dohyeok, she finds him in a bad mood. She can't bring herself to tell him face to face, so she plans to go straight to HR. She knows it's not a light decision, but she'll explain it later. As she sneaks away, Dohyeok notices and asks, "Where are you going?" Unable to form a sentence, Yu-eun dashes away. Dohyeok starts running after her, finally catching up and asking, "What happened?" He spots the resignation letter and asks if she's serious. Yu-eun apologizes, promising to teach the next secretary everything she knows. "Is it because of me?" Dohyeok asks, looking genuinely concerned. "I'm sorry for my actions. Please, give me another chance." Yu-eun pauses. "Why do you keep calling me by my name? What is all this?" Dohyeok hesitates before explaining, recalling the events of the previous night. Yu-eun becomes flustered, remembering everything, and quickly turns away, muttering that she doesn't understand what he's saying. She starts running down the stairs but accidentally trips. A flashback hits her. She remembers being in a car accident with her parents, everything turning dark. She opens her eyes to find herself on the floor, embraced by an unconscious Dohyeok. It turns out he has a mild concussion and will need to wear a cast for a month. Yu-eun feels an overwhelming sense of guilt, wondering if this might land her in trouble. She begins to apologize, but Dohyeok redirects the conversation to her resignation letter. He suggests she delay it for now. Before Yu-eun can respond, the chairman enters and immediately asks if Dohyeok is okay. Dohyeok reassures him, but the chairman presses, asking how the injury happened. Yu-eun tenses up, knowing this could be a disaster for her. However, Dohyeok lies, saying he tripped on the stairs and that Secretary Gam called an ambulance. The chairman, satisfied with the explanation, turns to Yu-eun and praises her for her quick actions. Yu-eun is touched by Dohyeok's generosity, but her thoughts race. The chairman notices the resignation letter and asks what it is. Yu-eun, startled, quickly grabs the letter, explaining that she had brought the paperwork in such a hurry. She crumples the paper, deciding to delay her resignation for now. Later that night, Yu-eun helps Dohyeok pack up his things to work from home. He admits, "It's thanks to you that I realized I've been lacking as a boss. I'm sorry if I've made you uncomfortable. I didn't want to lose a competent co-worker like you," he continues. Yu-eun sighs. "I wasn't competent," she quips. "I accidentally added salt to your coffee and put way too many cucumbers in your sandwich." She clarifies that she didn't hurt his arm on purpose. Dohyeok smiles and confesses, "It feels good to see you feel guilty about me." "I can't let you leave now," he says, causing Yu-eun to blush profusely. She quickly turns away, and Dohyeok wonders aloud, "We're such a fantastic match. A wicked boss and a wicked secretary." After completing the transfer of her new secretary 4 weeks ago, Yu-eun found it to be a tough adjustment. The deadly commute between her home and the company and the president's house was too much to handle. One day, Dohyeok suggested they work together at his home. She wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but when they arrived, she realized his home wasn't really a home. As they ate awkwardly, Yu-eun wondered if she was the only one with dirty thoughts. She tried to make conversation by asking what he did on weekends. "I read books," he replied. Yu-eun tried to keep the conversation going by asking about the books he read in the office. She then pointed out that his children must be happy to have him. Surprised, Dohyeok clarified, "I'm single. I don't have children." Yu-eun was secretly happy about this, but when she realized why she felt that way, her joy quickly faded. She tried to cover up her embarrassment by chuckling, saying her mother always warned her she'd be punished if she left leftovers on her plate. "I guess I have a long way to go before I'm fully grown up," she said, smiling. Dohyeok smiled back. "Your mother sounds like a good person." Yu-eun agreed, but an awkward silence followed. She quickly tried to change the subject, suggesting they go for coffee at a nearby cafe, but Dohyeok hesitated. "My mother isn't here," he said. "I don't like the coffee at that cafe. How about a stroll instead?" She agreed, wondering what had just happened between them. They walked in silence until Dohyeok broke it, apologizing for the earlier conversation. "It's okay," she said, sipping her coffee. "I brought up the topic." As she tasted the coffee, she was amazed at how delicious it was. Dohyeok then commented, "It's too bad we won't see each other after this. If I'd known this would happen, I would have been nicer to you." Yu-eun's eyes widened. She couldn't understand why he was saying this now. On Friday, Yu-eun and Dohyeok were working overtime. She offered him coffee, and he agreed. As she stirred the coffee, tired, she hoped to forget about his earlier words. She knew there were only 2 weeks left before she resigned, and she found relief in that thought. Her moment of relief was interrupted when Dohyeok approached her to apologize for making her work overtime. "It's fine," she said, just as her stomach growled, making her blush. "How about we get dinner?" Dohyeok suggested. She agreed, saying she was fine with anything. "Anything except beans?" he asked, a playful grin on his face. Yu-eun laughed and agreed. He scrolled through his phone, searching for food options, and she watched him fondly. As she realized what she was doing, she became determined to quit her job. Later, the doorbell rang. Yu-eun offered to answer it, but when she opened the door, she found Lee standing outside. Dohyeok had a sense of déjà vu. Lee, noticing the tension, remarked, "I'll leave if I'm interrupting," but Dohyeok assured him it wasn't what he thought. Lee then looked at Yu-eun and lectured Dohyeok for the way he treated others. "I came to drink and watch a movie with you," he said. Yu-eun couldn't help but recall what she had seen back at the office, and she began to wonder if their relationship wasn't as normal as it seemed. Jealous feelings crept in, but she quickly shook them off. After all, she was planning to quit soon. She packed her bag, reminding herself that it had been a brief yet enjoyable experience with the president. Pushing back her tears, she walked out of the room.